We're often a bit too quick to make assumptions about people, to predict what they think or how they behave on the basis of appearance. It's as if as soon as we get a glimpse of someone, we think we know who they are. I'm quite often the celebrant at a wedding. At a recent reception, a member of the staff kindly offered my wife a glass of champagne. She then dutifully offered me a glass of fruit juice. She thought she knew who I ought to be. She'd stereotyped me. How wrong she was. Even though my guest today, Associate Professor Edwina Pio, is visibly a part of a minority in New Zealand, she can't be stereotyped or predicted. And her writings, including her book Longing and Belonging, remind us that that's an unwise thing to do to any migrant.
It's about Asians, Middle Eastern, Latin American and African peoples in New Zealand. And I think while they do in many ways long to belong to New Zealand, there's also a tremendous longing, angst and grief for their country of origin.
Is there a long process as people make that transition from being a new refugee or immigrant to someone who senses an identity with New Zealand?
I think a lot of it depends on the kind of employment that they get, because I believe that identity and employment are two sides of the same coin, in the sense of giving a person more self-efficacy and a belief in being fulfilled in a new country with whom you've cast your lot. It generally takes at least about 2 years to sort of find your footing. And then for some, it's a never-ending process. If you ask me about myself, I think I have many homes. I'd like to think of it that way. So I think I wouldn't want to live anywhere else in the world now except New Zealand. I absolutely love the country. But I love India as well. So it doesn't mean that if I love New Zealand a lot, that I love India less. Since I'm also associated with a number of universities across the world, like Boston and Cambridge University, and in Barcelona, ESADE, that I think I get a lot of my intellectual stimulation from those places. We have to have a number of identities, because I am a woman. When I've come to New Zealand, I've suddenly become ethnic. I've suddenly become colored, but I'm also Indian. And I think, why should I only go by the perception of what others or the majority host culture seeks to perceive in me? And in a way, the two books that I've written about New Zealand, Sari and Longing and Belonging, seek to dislodge or fracture a number of the stereotypes that people have about these non-traditional migrants.
You yourself are anything but a stereotype. People don't usually associate migrants with 50s rock and roll.
I do go for classes, and it's just a lot of fun, and it's a good workout as well, and with lovely music.
Edwina, you grew up in Mumbai or Bombay. I'm not sure which of those names you prefer.
Yes, I prefer to use the term Bombay. It's actually Portuguese. Bom is good, the good bay. And they came to India saying, we seek Christians and spices. So I'm part of that heritage or genealogy of Vasco da Gama and Francis Xavier and all these kinds of people. The current name is Mumbai, named after one of the Hindu goddesses. India has a history of about 40 centuries, from the Indus Valley and Harappa civilization, etc. And then colonialism for about 5 centuries. But we had the Portuguese, the French, the Dutch, and primarily the British. So while my grandparents spoke Portuguese when they didn't want us to understand what they were saying, we grew up only speaking English at home. I was brought up in a very strict Roman Catholic family. I lived within a stone's throw of about 4 churches. In the month of May and October, we said the rosary. There were grottos, and all the roads were called by the different saints' names: Saint Sebastian, Saint Anthony, Saint John the Baptist. And we went to church every Sunday. You often went for daily mass. I played the organ in church for mass. My mom sang and still sings in the church choir. We had only Anglo-Saxon names, so my name Edwina is after Lord Louis Mountbatten's wife, Edwina Mountbatten. Very colonial now when I look back, and we were very proud of being that way. Always Western clothes, so dresses. When we went to church, we wore the veil or beautiful hats, and it was the others who wore the Indian garments and the Indian clothes, not us.
So that set you apart from them. Mm.
Yes, it did. But then most Indians prefer to send their children to convent schools because the education is very good. We used to have classes in the morning which would be Catholic and non-Catholic, and I always thought Catholics were the majority till I went to the university and found that there's no such thing as Catholic and non-Catholic. Actually, Catholics are a minority. So that was a bit of a startling revelation to me, to say the least. And when I look at the census figures today, 2.3% of Indians are Christian, about 12 million are Roman Catholics, so 3 times the population of New Zealand.
Yes, there's quite a few.
Yes, yes.
When you're growing up, your father was in the army.
That's right.
And so you travelled quite a lot around, particularly the north of India.
That's right. But there would always be a church wherever we went. So the British were very good in building churches, these wonderful monuments to God.
So you were comfortable with those other traditions? They weren't a threat to you?
No, never a threat.
And accepted by them?
No, I would say not, in the sense that they felt that we were too foreign. There was never anything overt. There was never any conflict. We were children, you play with everyone.
Yes. Your parents sent you to a Jesuit college.
I don't think they sent me there. I insisted on going to that college.
You insisted?
Yes, but it was a Catholic college, so
I
that
see.
was good. Because we only spoke English at home, I did have a difficulty in doing well in the Indian languages. So when I went to the Jesuit college, they said, is this language called Pali, which you can take if you want? And I said, yes. Pali is actually a bridge between Sanskrit, which is the more classical language, and the modern Indian languages of Marathi, Gujarati, Hindustani, etc. And we studied the Buddhist scriptures in their original form.
So what did you make of Buddhism? Having been steeped in the Catholic tradition as you were, what did you make of this Buddhism being taught in this Catholic university?
Oh, I loved it because it was. I thought you had only parables in the Bible, but here you open the Buddhist Jatakas and you have all these stories similar to Aesop's fables, if you will, and I found all these tremendous similarities, but I also found that Buddhism had a tremendous compassion. So you go to church, you have the crucified Christ, and here you have this Buddha in meditation, and later on the laughing Buddha. So I find it very difficult to find a picture of Jesus laughing and happy and just enjoying life. And I found also in the Buddhist scriptures a tremendous discipline, which I liked, and a deep exploration of consciousness, which I had never seen in the Christian or Catholic tradition. I know today if I read the mystics, St. Teresa of Avila and St. John of the Cross, I will find these things. But at that point in time, I was not exposed to it. I grew up in the Catholic tradition which said this is the only pathway to God. And I used to think, 50% of my friends are from other religions. Are they never going to be in heaven with me, assuming I reach heaven? But so I had these question marks in my mind, and therefore I think I found Buddhism extremely liberating. It also gave me the liberty, if you will, to explore these different things, to start wearing Indian garments.
So you started to wear a sari? Or...
a salwar kameez, actually,
Yes.
which is easier to drape. A sari is a bit complicated.
Yes.
Yes, but yes. And my parents said it was okay as long as I didn't, in a way, go further, like wearing the bindi on my head. I think I've been blessed by having 5 wonderful Jesuit mentors. They opened my mind because they would always suggest books to read as well. So at no point in time was I ever made to feel, don't look at that, you can't do this, which is perhaps if I had stuck with the diocesan priests, the kind that I had, I felt they were very ossified.
You went on to do a doctorate yourself in Buddhist psychology.
I did.
That's a phrase which is very esoteric to me. Tell us what that means.
Yes. I fell in love with Buddhism and I absolutely loved it. I looked at the traditional form of Buddhism, the first form, which is Theravada Buddhism, was all about the mind. And what is psychology if not about the mind? And so I thought, hey, perhaps I can meld the two. And really, that's what I did. I looked at it as a theory of personality and looked at the different levels of consciousness, how you can reach the different levels of consciousness, and how you can transcend the mundane, but do it through a very disciplined way. It was also very ascetic, and I somehow seemed to like that.
You then, I guess, building on that, went on to teach in management, psychology and spirituality. There's a really interesting mix of subject matters, especially, I guess, for somewhere like New Zealand, which doesn't like to see spirituality named and infecting these other secular disciplines.
Absolutely, yes. That's true. I just felt that who we are as human beings, I think as a human being, each of us is intrinsically spiritual. And each one of us has a divine spark within us, whether we choose to accept that or not. And I felt that management is organizing different things, maybe business. Psychology is about the mind, and spirituality is about transcending both for the better, for bringing the whole person into the organization. And I remember when I started the first course, the university said to me, we cannot give a credit for it. And I'm sure you'll get no one. The class was oversubscribed. So to me, that is just an indication that there is a hunger for that kind of a thing. I was invited to teach at the Papal Seminary, which is also part of a Jesuit university there, for training religious, both priests and nuns. And I went there to teach a course on pastoral psychology. And one of the things I said, I had about 100 people in the class, most of them seminarians, all eager to go with this wonderful vocation they've got. And I said, that's wonderful. So what's the product you're marketing? And they were extremely upset with me. How can you sort of pick up this thing of God? You're a Catholic, Edwina, or are you? And bring that down to a level of a product. And I said, but actually that is what you are doing. And perhaps priests fail us because they mess up the accounts, they mess up things because they don't know.
Do you think that the resistance is because some people see this as some kind of commodification of the sacred?
Absolutely.
The Buddhist psychology and the way you've applied it to management fields raises the question, I guess, about the way the business world has insisted on Western models for understanding how business is to be effectively carried out. Have you engaged with that discussion?
I have tried to, yes. So if you link it to the deeply held values and traditions of that particular group of people, I think you'll be able to get people who are able to really bring themselves fully into the organization and achieve fulfillment. So things like karma or dharma, which are really the Eastern way, so may not be strictly Buddhism, but partly Hinduism as well, that would come in. So dharma is a service to others, doing good. And today in management, they say, how can you do well in business by doing good?
Have you found people receptive to that kind of language?
I think it's building up even in New Zealand, though currently one is talking more about, looking after the environment. So one's looking at it more in that way. And when you say spiritual, Maori organizations are now talking about spirituality, but then quite often people say, oh, those are Maori organizations, talking about it. It's not yet mainstream.
Edwina, at a reasonably early age, you became a solo mother. That must have been very difficult.
Oh, I think it was the dark night of the soul as far as I'm concerned. Extremely difficult. I think if I had come to New Zealand many years ago, my life would have been much, much easier because New Zealand tends to look after solo mums in a very different way from India. I was ostracized. I suddenly became someone who you don't really invite out. And it was very difficult. I got some kind of support from my parents. They struggled with that, I know, because...
This was so culturally anathema.
Absolutely. I thought, here's this beautiful baby I have, and he's a gift to me. So I have to do the best by him, and therefore I want to not just survive, but thrive, because how I am and what I can put into him is how he is going to be. And of course, his faith in me was total. So I had to have faith in myself because very few people had faith in me at that point in time. So it was very difficult. But I think also my Jesuit friends, they were wonderful. I could talk to them and, explore the different facets of my grief.
What led you to come to New Zealand to be one of the immigrants you now write about?
I think I felt that India was not really as accepting of minorities as one would hope that it could be or it should be. A lot of this is not given press, but there have been a number of things happening in different parts of India. And I felt coming to New Zealand would give my son a much better opportunity. It would be like a springboard for him so that, the world could be his oyster after that. And so I packed up, came here without a job. And I can't believe I did it. And knocked on doors. Everyone told me, you'll never succeed. You'll never get a job in a university. But I kind of just held out. I had to believe in myself, and I was determined I will not be a cleaner or one of these. I would not take any kind of job. I would not want to be stuck in a job as a supermarket checkout operator. I thought that would kill me, kind of, internally. And so I knocked on doors, did the hard yards, and managed to get work on an hourly basis, and it grew. But I think in that, my experience in India or developing countries was largely disregarded. It was the fact that I had experience in Europe and Boston, the more colonial kind of countries, that in a way gave me credibility in the eyes of potential employers. So when I came here, extremely difficult, but my son took to it like a fish to water. And I thought...
So the decision was vindicated.
It's taken out of my hands, yes. He adores the country. He just loves it. So, and I'm very happy here. If you have the grit to stick on, it is really a paradise. The soil in New Zealand is wonderful. I live near One Tree Hill. We have the best soil. And we have a community garden nearby run by the CCS Disability Centre. So I sometimes go there. I do a bit of community patrol. And try and put back something into the community. And I would hope that every migrant who comes here feels that it's their duty to do that and not wait for New Zealand to give back to them, but they need to also put something back into this wonderful kete. New Zealand is a very generous society, but I think it expects that once migrants come here, they say, hey, you're here, manage. And the migrants are thinking, we had all these promises and hopes and dreams before we came here. How do we fulfill them? Because at every step, particularly those who are visibly different, you have problems because people feel that you're not going to be a good fit. And of course, the non-traditional people are just 10% of the New Zealand population. But with the media saying Asianization by stealth and all these kinds of things, people think, my goodness. And so, unfortunately, that gives migrants a hard time. And I think also dilutes the cachet of the richness that they bring to this country.
Do migrants have responsibilities in terms of coming to terms fluently with English if they're not already so?
Yes, I think all migrants need to learn English. They've chosen to come to this country. Even if they are refugees, they've chosen to accept coming to this country. I think they must learn English.
Do you think migrants have a particular responsibility to come to terms with the Treaty of Waitangi?
Yes, I do believe so. But then I say, do Pākehā have they come to terms with the treaty?
Not yet, no.
No, not yet. But I instead of using the words coming to terms with it, I would say, do they have some knowledge of the treaty? Because I believe it's really important to respect, appreciate the tangata whenua. When you look at the Treaty of Waitangi, they let migrants come here. It was not migrants who are only British.
And now you are teaching at the Auckland University of Technology.
That's correct. I'm an associate professor there, and I work in the management department. The booklet also has to have a description of the organization.
Yes.
Then would be the actual aspect of what the trainer would be using. But I teach papers like HR and training and development, bachelor's, master's. I have PhD students.
And still in that area of the intersection of management and spirituality?
I would say less spirituality because, as you said earlier, it's still shrouded in New Zealand. So I'm trying to unveil it.
So what do you make of that? What do you make of New Zealand's unwillingness to speak about spirituality?
I think New Zealanders pride themselves on being independent thinkers and being very rational. So perhaps spirituality is a part of the irrational side of who we are, but then we are all irrational, you might say. So, but I think they are more prepared now to explore alternative ways of looking at things.
How would you see that working?
I think if we are able to separate religiosity from spirituality, perhaps it might make more sense, and perhaps then people might be a little less threatened. So if we look at the common values that religions have, it's the ways of expression that are different, then I think one could really find a common meeting ground.
Yes,
but you could, on a more mundane level, link this to a work-life balance, to well-being within the organization, to social entrepreneurship. And I would say it is increasingly being done, but not using the terminology of spirituality. And they're very particular that these are the people who are the future, this is the talent we have, let's develop them, let's nurture them, and let's ensure that they do not leave the organization.
Spiritual capital is a phrase that you've used.
Yes. I've had some people say we leave our backbone and our mind outside the door when we enter the organization. One would hope that if an organization develops spiritual capital, you're not in an extractive mode with the person.
So you're wanting to invite the whole of the person to participate in the organization?
Yes, and I believe that is really what will give loyalty, what will give commitment. You can't just throw these words around and expect people to say, yes, I'm committed in the organization because I've been here for 5 years. I don't think so. And he talks about why it's so important that we try and make ourselves happier, hopefully, than we currently are, because work does form so much of our lives. If we could have been the first nation in the world to give women suffrage, surely we can do some things like this. We are small enough, contained enough, sealed enough to make a real difference.
So you could conceive, or you'd like to be able to conceive, of a situation where New Zealand intentionally built its spiritual capital, its commitment to universal values, to justice.
Yes. Yes.
in a conscious sense.
Yes, but away from institutionalization. So maybe rather linked to the UN's development goals that one has in terms of gender, looking after children, violence, and all these kinds of things, looking after minorities. New Zealand has a wonderful track record of its humanitarian response to different situations around the world.
You feel institutions probably work against this rather than...
I think institutions are so particular about their theologies that they seek to zealously guard them. And in being so zealous and ardent in guarding them, perhaps they are a little less open than they could be. So I'd rather prefer that corporations look at these, because corporations are really governing what's happening to us today. They have the mega bucks. I go to church. They have these beautiful stained glass windows, and I've grown up with churches in Bombay which had gorgeous stained glass windows. So it kind of resonates with who I am. And while I go to church every week, I don't necessarily go to Mass every week. So I might choose to go at a time when no one else is there.
So, if I say the word God to you, what does that mean?
I've in a way struggled with that concept because when I grew up, we had all these Western images of God and clouds and God the Father. And so I still have those kinds of images when one thinks of God. But I would also like to think of God as a wondrous intelligence, as being very gentle, merciful, also joyous. But I like the word of a wondrous intelligence, because that means that he or she, this force, would know what's needed and when it's needed. And I think that's where we as human beings struggle. But also, if you look at the Indian scriptures, they say whichever way you describe God, it's always neti, 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 which means not this, not this, not this. I like to do mindfulness walking or walking in solitude. I say the rosary every day as well. I just feel it's like a mantra, if you will. It just sort of calms my mind, and then I'm all set for the rest of the day. I grew up being a very strong, traditional Roman Catholic. That was my identity. It still is. I am a Catholic. I would say I'm a born Catholic. But what I do with the interpretation of the values, I think, is very different from what I would do if I had not been exposed to Buddhism or my travels.
Supporting local content so you can see more of New Zealand on air.